Before I get started, I want to address the URL that's up on your screen there. If you just write that down, you don't have to take pictures of anything that you might be interested in on the screen. That'll take you to a page on my website that will have the slides. Any resource that I mentioned during my time with you here today will be on that blog post as well as a number of additional resources that you can use to explore this topic. I look around the room and I see a lot of friendly faces that I know, people who know me and know I'm from New York. The rest of you probably figured that out about a second and a half after I opened my mouth. So you realize very quickly that I'm from America. And you may have shifted your mindset to an entirely new set of questions that you might want to pose to me based on certain things that are going on in the world. So let's discuss the elephant in the room before we get started. And you might look at this slide and think, oh, wow, he picked a picture of an elephant. No, I wanted to be more design choice of that. I chose this because it features a gigantic ass. And that's really the elephant in the room right now. And I can just very quickly to address that. I am part of what I would refer to as a statistically validated majority of Americans that do not agree with what's going on. I'm part of a group of people who don't look like me, don't speak like me, don't share the same religious beliefs as me, and yet we are all part of the same country. And to put it bluntly, and pardon my French, we fucked up. And we're trying to make it right. But that is not the alternate reality that we're here to talk about today. What we're here today is to explore one critical question. I would sum up the question that I'm here to talk to you about in one simple question. Is VR the right solution for your organization? And that's kind of the core question anytime a new technology emerges that we try and figure out. We look at it from all sides and we come to an answer. And I'm here to give you that answer. No. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your conference. But there's a reason that I say no. There's a reason for that, because you'll hear me use language very intentionally when I speak. And there are a lot of aspects of that question that I think are wrong, and we approach new technologies with the wrong question in mind. Virtual reality is a buzzword, and it's a buzzword because it is extremely popular around the world. It's a pop culture thing, and it's emerging very quickly. We see pictures like this. We miss you, Barack. But we see pictures like this of people exploring this new wonderful world of virtual reality. And it is an exciting and new world. But when we look at a question like, is VR the right solution for your organization, we have to look at the language that we're using. Is a present tense verb. That's kind of saying, should I use VR now? And you got to put this question into the context of what's going on with the technology and what's going on with your organization. VR is a new technology. It's in its infancy, really, and it is evolving at a very rapid pace. And you have to put that then into the context of your own organization and say, where are we today? And is there a problem that this is going to solve for us? And that's how you reframe the question. When you reframe the question, you kind of look at it and say, will VR be a valuable solution for our organization in the future? And I would argue that that's the way we should be posing the question, and we should be approaching virtual reality. Because for the majority of the people that are in this room, it's not a solution for you. It's not going to solve a problem for you today. And it may not be accessible for you today. But will it be a valuable solution for your organization in the future? And the answer to that is a definitive maybe. Because the reality is we have to be exploring this in different ways. We have to be asking the right questions. One of the things that I was asked to address during this session were, what are the common questions and the mistakes that people make when they start venturing down this road? And I was very happy to be asked to address that question because we know those questions already. We know the mistakes that are going to be made by people going down the road of exploring virtual reality. Why? Because we've made them already. We have a wonderful habit within our industry of making the same mistakes over and over and over. And when you talk about implementing new technologies, we have a wonderful square peg, round hole technique where we try and shoehorn existing methodologies into a new technology. And the problem is with that is what we're doing is we're carrying the existing baggage of what is with us. And in order to truly explore the possibilities that exist with any new technology, we need to leave that baggage behind us. Think about when we first had e-learning emerge. What did it look like? PowerPoint. It looked like the PowerPoint presentation that the trainer used with a next button. We didn't explore what the possibilities were for a learning environment that existed on a computer. We shoehorned the classroom onto a computer. We did the same thing with our mobile devices. We had this paradigm that was e-learning, and now mobile came out, and we shoehorned e-learning into the mobile devices without exploring the unique affordances that are available through this incredible technology. The mistakes that we're going to make with VR, we know them already because we've made them before. And we need to let go of what we do. We tend to approach new technologies with a wrong question. We tend to approach it and say, how do I do what I do through this new technology? And that is the wrong question. The right question is, how does this new technology change what I do? How does this new technology enable me to serve whoever it is that I'm serving in a better way? What new element does it add to my tool belt? Another mistake we make with these technologies is we approach them with the idea of, well, what is this going to replace? Well, why does it need to replace anything? Nothing is dead. The classroom's not dead. The desktop's not dead. And mobile's not going to be dead because of VR. It's just another tool that's in the belt that can give us a more tailored solution set. So before we can really go into VR or any new technology, we need to let go of what is and to truly keep our eyes open, remove the blinders of what is so we can really see the opportunities that are available to us. And that's when we can really start asking questions. Because when you have those blinders on, you ask the wrong questions and therefore you get the wrong answers. And I would argue when it comes to VR, we have to ask the right questions. And we need to skip over the ones that might seem obvious, especially now in this early stages of VR being used as a tool. For instance, one of the simple questions, the basic questions I think we need to ask ourselves is very simple. What is virtual reality? When you hear that term, virtual reality, what is it to you? It's really an excuse for me to take a drink. We have to be able to answer this question. And as Andrew mentioned, the answer used to be really obvious. That's what VR was. That's what VR was to everybody. For some reason, we needed to wear a Tron-based wetsuit. We needed helmets that looked like something that Daft Punk decided not to use that day. And when we put the helmet on, we experienced something that was pretty much the nightmares that the animators from Toy Story had when they slept. And that's what VR was. And as a side note, someone is now working on a redo of this film in virtual reality. They're making it a VR film because apparently leaving bad enough wasn't well enough alone. But anyway, that's a side point. But that's what virtual reality was. And that's the paradigm through which the technology is advanced, but we kind of have this idea that that's what VR is. You put on this headset and you get a different reality. And I would argue that in today's environment, that's not as simple as that. It's not that easy to define. If you look at the devices that are out there, these are 8 examples of a long list of different examples of helmets that you could be wearing in a virtual reality environment. It's not as simple as one size fits all anymore. And I would argue that we tend to look at the hardware too much because the hardware isn't really the problem. It's the experiences that that hardware enables that I would argue says VR isn't a specific enough category anymore because there are so many different layers of experiences that exist within the VR spectrum that we need to make sense of. And one is so different than the other that you can't just say, well, it's a VR experience anymore because there are so many different varieties. But in order to truly get into the details of what these different types of experiences are, you do need to start from an understanding of what it is. So I want to talk about the 2 components that really make up most VR experiences today. The first one is the hardware component. Hardware for VR breaks down into basically 2 categories. You have your smartphone-based VR, and you have your dedicated VR, where there's a separate piece that is not connected to a smartphone in any way. Most VR, the vast majority of VR that's out there right now can fit into those 2 categories. Your smartphone VR has a number of advantages. It's cheap. It's convenient. You can laugh at people when they look like this. That's another advantage. Because everyone has that look when they put on the Google Cardboard like this. They always seem to do that. But the device that you need for the VR, most people are walking around with it in their pocket. However, on the flip side, the experiences that you can get through smartphone-based VR are fairly limited in today's world. Starting to advance, of course, it's a rapidly evolving technology, but the experiences that you can get are pretty limited in terms of the way that you can engage with the content. Compare that to dedicated VR, it is more expensive. Now, one of the things I think we need to acknowledge why VR is emerging, I say more expensive, not expensive. Expensive is a contextual comment, but I say it's more expensive because it is considerably more expensive than smartphone-based VR, but the prices of it are dropping rapidly. It's one of the reasons that VR is becoming extremely popular within our environment right now, because it's an accessible technology for most of us on a consumer level. And that's one of the things I think is very important from a VR discussion or from a technology discussion as well. If you want to understand how technology is going to change learning and development, you don't look at the education space. You look at the consumer space. Because if you want to understand how technology is going to change the way that we learn, you have to follow how technology is changing the way that we live. And there's a lot of changes to the way that we live through media emerging from the VR space. There's going to be a normalcy attached to VR experiences that is going to change the way we engage with content as consumers, and that behavior will naturally shift towards expectations around education and learning, that people will naturally learn through these technologies and education will emerge from it. So we need to be looking at it through that lens. But it's more expensive, but it is rapidly becoming an attainable expense for most of us. It also requires additional hardware. I love this picture. This is an official picture from Oculus, and it really demonstrates very well the type of immersive existence that you have there. But it is also very strategic that the cord that is attached to the headset is going behind him and out of view. And also out of view, somewhere right around here, if the picture was there, is the ginormous PC that is hooked up to this headset that is running the hardware. Because right now, most of the dedicated VRs do require a pretty high-end PC attached to the VR hardware itself to run it. So dedicated VR has the additional hurdle of needing an additional layer of hardware besides the VR hardware itself in order to run it. Now, on the flip side, these technologies can run much more immersive, engaging experiences than what you could get from a typical smartphone experience. Now, the hardware is only one component. The other major component that we have to talk about is the type of VR content that exists, which also breaks down into two major categories. You have your 2D photospheric content, which is essentially your 360 video or 360 imagery that you can do with very accessible right now. And then you have 3D modeled worlds that exist within a virtual reality environment. The 2D stuff, it has a lot of advantages. If you've ever seen an image like this on a screen that seems to be laid out strangely, you see a lot of these on Facebook nowadays, that's a 3D photospheric image that when you lay it out flat, that's what it looks like. And then when it goes through a computer that can put it into a VR world, it just flattens it, it rolls it up so that you can see it in this photospheric environment. These are they're passive experiences, which is not a bad thing, but they're passive experiences. They are very quick and easy to create. I have a camera that I got for less than $200 that I just press a button and it does 360 video for me, that I can just press another button and it goes onto Facebook, or I can post it to a VR, all very simply. It's an extremely easy and accessible technology now. How many of you have posted a 360 video on Facebook? Yeah, I ask that question often, and every time I ask it, more and more hands are going up, because they've made it very simple to do that with your existing technology. Another thing, it's quick and easy to create, provided you're actually physically at the location. You have to be there to do it. And it can be viewed on the vast majority of devices. Compare that to the 3D modeling content that's out there. It's extremely engaging. This is a screen grab from an Oculus Rift game called The Climb. And it's extremely engaging. You have your hands out there and you're climbing around a thing and you're looking around and you're just seeing this huge, beautiful vista and a drop that would kill you. I guarantee you the amount of people who play this game would drop dramatically if they figure out how to incorporate gravity into the feeling of that game. But it's extremely engaging. But the creation of this sort of content takes much more skill, time, and money in order to make it happen. Because the main thing, at a very simplified level, the main thing that makes the 3D modeling environment so much more engaging, and if you look at this picture as an example, if this was a photospheric image, you would see the end of that cliff there. but because it's 3D modeling, I can reach my hand around it and tilt my head over and see the other side of the cliff. You can see the full environment. You can look around the environment in ways that you could never do with a photospheric image. So those are the two types of content associated with VR. And if you put that all together, you can put it down into a 2x2 grid. Now, David Burden did a great job with this grid. The link's there. It's also on the overall website thing that I showed there. And what he did is he took different types of experiences and laid it out across this grid of what's a smartphone with 3D modeling type of experience, what's a dedicated VR with 2D photospheric type of experience, and he kind of laid out a matrix of different types of experiences and where they land on here. And I encourage you to check that out. But I want to look at it from a different layer, because I would argue, as much as there's a lot of value in just looking at those different experiences in this 2x2 grid, I don't think the 2x2 grid goes deep enough, especially in the context of learning and development. Because the reality is, if you started from the bottom left and went to the upper right, you'd, for the most part, be looking at an increasing level of immersion in the content, in the experience that someone is having. And from a learning and development standpoint, that's kind of what we're looking for. We're looking for people to be immersed in an experience so that they can really get the context and the application of what they want to do. And I think the level of immersion is a piece of the VR discussion that really is defining it at this point. And why I say that there's different categories of VR, it's that immersive piece that I think we need to be looking at. Because I come back to this picture before, these are 3 examples of someone engaging in VR content. And they are having 3 distinctly different experiences. We tend to look at VR, and what are we focusing on in terms of the hardware, in terms of VR, for the most part? The helmet. I heard someone say the headset. That's what we're looking at, because that's where the experience is taking place. But if you think about the immersion level of it, it's not coming through the headset. It's coming through the question of what am I doing with my hands during this experience. That's where the level of immersion really kicks in. And I would break it down into 4 levels of immersion that we need to be exploring. The first and the basic one is what I would refer to as completely passive experiences. And I come back to this image very strategically for a specific reason. Look at that girl with the Frozen shirt on. Look at that face. She is losing her mind right now of how much she is enjoying this. Completely passive is not, we tend to associate certain words in a positive or negative sense within our field that don't necessarily have that baggage attached to them. Disruption's a good example. When we say disruption, most people go, ooh, it's disrupting things, that's bad. Disruption is a completely neutral word. It's how we respond to the disruption that makes it positive or negative. Passive is another word that I would argue is a neutral word. It just means that I'm not engaging with it. I can sit there and the content can come to me. And in this particular environment, you can see she's having a ball. How many of you are academics in this particular environment? See some academics. Okay. So what these people are doing here, I would say, is learning. They have an environment they can learn. Google's doing some great stuff with field trips, where they take Google Cardboard, they go out and they take kids through these cardboard experiences to environments they'd never be able to visit on Earth, the Amazon and other places all around the world. And they are creating learning experiences for them through these experiences, extremely powerful. The rest of you didn't raise your hand, I assume are probably coming from some level of an organizational or corporate environment. They don't care about learning. I know they say they do, but they don't care about learning. If learning is leading to someone being able to do better, then they care about learning. But if you put the question out there, side note, don't. But if you put the question out there and say, listen, if people could learn a lot, but it's not going to help them do their job, would you still want me to do it? Most of them are going to say, get out of my office. Because they don't care. They care less about the learning and more about the performance attached to that. They care about learning if it's leading to performance, which if we're doing our job right, it does. But in this particular environment, this is a learning thing, but it's really not an application thing. You're getting context and you're getting understanding, but you're not learning to do in a completely passive environment. The next level up would be what I would refer to as minimally interactive. Your Samsung Gear, or this particular example is a fairly new one, Google Daydream, where it's still a smartphone, and it's still the same sort of content, but you've got some minimal interactions there. Some of those minimal interactions can take the form of a dot that is in the center of your screen, that if you just stop your focus and allow that dot to sit on certain points, it will trigger an interaction. Google Daydream has a handheld remote. which has taken it to the next level where instead of just being a remote with a button, it's kind of got some of that Wii remote from the Nintendo Wii functionality where it's kind of a wand, and it enables you to engage in the content in different ways. So, but it's minimally interactive, but it is getting it. One of the things that's hugely interactive about it is one of the differences you see here. She no longer has her hands holding on to the device. The fact that she now has removed her hands and she's engaging with it with one of her other is making the level of immersion that much deeper. The next level I would describe is remote control. Remote control is when you literally have something like a video game controller in your hand and you're operating what you're seeing in the environment using that. You might be operating someone's hands, you might be operating a car, you might be operating a piece of machinery, but you're essentially doing it by remote control. There's not that much of a difference in terms of the experience other than your perspective from what you're doing with the remote control in a VR environment than if you're controlling a remote control car on your street. You're still holding something in your hand to control something else that's in front of you. And that's another level of immersion, and used in the right context, it can be extremely engaging. But it's another level of immersion. What we're really seeing in this high level of immersion in VR, and where I think the future of VR, especially in a learning development, is when you get past level 3 and you go to level 4, which I would refer to as your virtual hands. That's when you have these wands that you're holding in your hand, and they're formed in a way that you're literally holding things in your hand, where you can pick something up in the virtual world, and because it's in this wand, you actually kind of feel it in your hand. Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that you're holding today is guns, but you can feel like you have the gun in your hand when you're pointing it. And having that level of, that cognitive level of I'm moving my hands and I'm seeing my hands moving in a virtual environment gets you to a level of immersion where you actually can do things and you feel like I'm actually doing something. And when we talk about learning and development and we're trying to push learning and development to performance-based stuff, that's where the application can really start to kick in. Again, the technology and the applications are not really there yet. They're getting there, but that's when the rubbers are going to really start hitting the road within L&D, when we have accessible content and opportunities to use virtual hands in the VR environment. Now, the question also becomes, where is all of this happening? And this breaks down into two categories. Where would you think the larger of the two categories is coming from? I heard someone say games. Yeah. Video games is where the majority of the VR activity is coming from. The second category I would describe as everything else. And this is not a statistically, that's not a statistically driven pie chart. It is accurate to what's going on in the environment. The majority of it's coming from video games, and I think that graph represents it. I think it's more appropriate because essentially that graph looks like Pac-Man. And reality is, if you want to better understand VR, you need to be following what's going on in the video game space right now, because that's where a lot of the activity is taking place. If you want to see how VR is emerging and how it is changing, you need to be following the world of video games. That is something that I say because it's true, and not because it enables me to buy PlayStation VR, Oculus Rift, and tell my wife that it's research. But it's true. That's where all the innovation is going on. And you really, if you want to understand what's going on in VR, you need to be experiencing it. I see a lot of stuff I haven't had the opportunity to go down to the exhibition yet, but I see a lot of the vendors talking about VR being at their booth. And I don't know whether it's application or whether they're just doing it to get there. But if you haven't had the opportunity in your life yet, go down there, put one of these on, and go through an experience. Because we've been sitting here for 25 minutes, and we're going to sit here for an hour and talking about VR and AR. But VR is the type of thing that you can be talking about it, you can read all you want, but it's as if I was giving you a book that said how to ride a bike. You can read that book as much as you want, but you're not going to understand what it means to ride a bike until you get on it and start pedaling. That's what VR is. You need to put these headsets on to really understand what this immersive environment is like. But now I come back to the split here. Even though the majority of the activity is in the video game space, there are some really good examples and some early applications of VR outside of the gaming space that I wanted to share with you today. I already talked about the virtual field trips. Google's doing a lot of stuff with Google Field Trips and to be able to take people to different places and understand that environment. There's a great video. I did put this link in the resources that I shared of two 90-year-olds who spent their life traveling. And now that they're in their elder years, they no longer can travel, and it's kind of reduced their quality of life. And they put these VR helmets on them, and they put them in environments that they visited. And the two of them, it was like they were crying, because it was like they were back there together. I mean, you see these two older people with headsets on holding hands because it's like they're back in Venice. It is gorgeous to see, and that's the type of thing that you can do with a virtual field trip. Military, if you ever want to see a cutting-edge application of technology and practice, look at the military. They're always ahead of the game. They're doing a lot of stuff with VR right now. Same thing in the medical field. A lot of people who are using VR in the medical field. I don't know how I'd feel about a surgeon who only did this once or twice in VR before they opened me up, but a lot of work being done in that space. This is not an endorsement, but one of the things I saw recently is Immersion, which is a VR-based course. A course offerings tool. I'm curious to look into this because I hope it's not just a matter of we took our course and we ported it to VR. Not to say that it is, but I think the idea of someone looking at this in education saying we're going to put an entire educational experience on VR is very interesting. We have Woofbert, which takes you on into a virtual art gallery, so you can go see art from all around the world without leaving your home. This one I found interesting. The dating lessons website, which I saw come on Oculus and I kind of dismissed originally, but then I clicked into it and I was looking at it. I'm like, it's essentially firstpersonlynda.com types videos. And then I had to explain to my wife when she came in and said, what are you doing? What's going on here? Explain. Sweetie, it's research, I swear. But it's a lot of first-person video use. The New York Times has done some really amazing stuff in the area of 360 video and some of the news and documentaries that are out there. If you want to see how to do storytelling and how to convey information to people, look at what the news and the documentarians are doing with 360 video. A lot of great stuff there. And also just the entertainment industry. Oculus Story Studio did a film called Henry, which recently won the first Emmy for a VR award-winning film. And when I say follow it, one of the things I love about the VR filmmakers is they are working out loud. They're talking about how they've learned what they do in a traditional filmmaking environment, how it doesn't work in a VR environment, and how they've had to learn and adapt. Henry's a great example of that. Looking at the VR filmmaking, what's going on, I love the working out loud aspect of what they're doing there. A lot of great examples of VR in practice. Go out and explore them, because that's going to help you understand these technologies better so that you can apply them more in your organizations. And with that, I will actually close this time. Remind you, if you need anything, you can go to those resources and always reach out to me to talk about it more. Thanks so much.